All right, so again, before we get started, let's go through the 17 time periods again. So before the flood, the scattering of the people, the patriarchs, the Exodus, the wandering in the wilderness, invasion and conquest, the judges, the united kingdom, the divided kingdom, Judah alone, the captivity, the return from captivity, the years of silence, the life of Christ, the early church, and the letters to the Christians. So make sure that you're continuing to work on that if you don't already know it, and if you do know it, just use it as a means of continuing to work on it so you don't forget. Now we're live. And as we've talked about every time, so this is kind of cycle 3 in the 3-cycle approach. So we're going to finish up, Lord willing, the invasion and conquest today, but going back to the beginning, the central campaign, Joshua chapters 4 through 8, southern campaign, chapters 9 and 10, the northern campaign in chapter 11, the list of kings conquered in chapter 12, the land divided, chapters 13 through 19, the cities given to the priests and the Levites, and also the cities of refuge in Joshua 20 and 21. And then today we're talking about the Transjordanic tribes returning home in chapter 22, Joshua challenging Israel there in chapter 23, and then finally the covenant being renewed at Shechem in chapter 24. And then we're moving into the time period of the Judges in the book of the Judges, which will cover Othniel through Samson, which Othniel is one that is mentioned even in Joshua. And we'll talk about the story of Ruth, which takes place during the time period of the Judges and the book of Ruth, and then Eli and Samuel will lead us up until the point where Saul is anointed king there in 1 Samuel chapter 9. All right, so picking up now in Joshua chapter 22, and I hope that everybody can kind of see or understand, I hope maybe what the expectation that I have, and that is that you're going to read through the material. My focus is more on how can we apply the things that we read about in these various stories to our life. And so, obviously, I don't spend a whole lot of time going through the story again. I'm hoping that you're reading through and reminding yourself of the events that take place. But we will go ahead and read Joshua chapter 22, verses 16 through 20, which goes along with question 1. What lessons can we learn from the Israelites' experience in chapter 22 of misunderstanding and reconciliation? How can we apply these lessons to our own lives and relationships? So I do want to read verses 16 through 20. We'll start over here with Gil. Just take a verse apiece and work our way back.
Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, what treachery is this that you have committed against the God of Israel, to turn away this day from following the Lord, and that you have built for yourselves an altar, that you might rebel this day against the Lord?
Is the iniquity of Peor not enough for us, from which we are not cleansed till this day, although there was a plague in the congregation of the Lord?
Then you too must turn away this day from the following the Lord, and if you do rebel against the Lord today, then tomorrow he will be angry with this whole congregation of Israel.
But now, if the land of your possession is unclean, pass over into the Lord's land, where the Lord's tabernacle stands, and take for yourself a possession among us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, or make us as rebels, by building for yourselves an altar, other than the altar of the Lord our God.
Did not Achan the son of Zerah commit a trespass in the accursed thing, and wrath fell on all the congregation of Israel? And that man did not perish alone in his iniquity.
All right, so we've got the tribes on the east side of the Jordan that are returning home, and they build an altar, and those that are on the west side of the river, they see what's happening, and they're like, oh man, this is not good. We're going to have to go and kill our brothers now because of what is taking place. And so this is them now going and talking to them. So what can we learn from the Israelites' experience here, and how can we apply these lessons to our own lives and relationships? Ken?
Well, it seems as though some people jumped to conclusions before they knew the whole story. They thought that they had built this altar to offer sacrifices to God rather than the altar at the tabernacle. Of course, that would be an abomination, but that was not the case at all.
Okay, so there's some jumping to conclusions. Norm?
Yeah, I see it where there's two sides to it, and the one side is what Ken's talking about. The other side is sometimes people kind of, with good intentions, stray right to the edge of where it is to jump it over the point, and it leads in the future to, people could, like in this case, forget that that is not an altar for sacrifice. It was just a memorial, and then start doing sacrifices on it. There was no instruction from God for them to build an altar there to help them remember about their brothers. So even though it was with a good intention, sometimes we stray right to the edge of what's the law, and then it causes problems.
All right, so good intentions and possibly unintended consequences. Sam?
It would have been messed up if the other tribes just went and wiped them out without talking to them about it. But the concern that they showed, I mean, I guess relating to us, like it appears that a brother or sister is doing something they're not supposed to do. Like it is our duty to go and talk to them about it, and to make sure that, you know, we're all doing what we ought to do. And if it appears that they're not doing that, why would you not show that concern and, I guess, approach them about that? So like, don't go and judge them yourself if you don't have all the information. But I mean, sometimes what it looks like is going on might be what is going on. You should have that concern.
Yeah, I mean, the initial response was, yeah, there's some jump to conclusions, and the immediate reaction is, well, we got to go to war. But thankfully, they've got some good leaders still at this point. And if you kind of back up, we read 16 through 20, but if you back up, beginning in verse 13, it says, Then the sons of Israel sent to the sons of Reuben, and to the sons of Gad, and to the half the tribe of Manasseh, and to the land of Gilead, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, and with him 10 chiefs, one chief for each father's household, from each of the tribes of Israel. And each one of them was the head of his father's household among the thousands of Israel. They came to the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad, and to the half tribe of Manasseh, to the land of Gilead, and they spoke with them, saying, then what we had read there in 16 through 20. And so, yes, they jumped to conclusions, but they didn't act on their original reaction. They were prepared to do so, but kind of what Sam said there, they talked to them. They asked. All right? They recognized, you know what? This is what we're seeing. This is the way it looks to us. But maybe we should go and talk to them and find out actually what is going on. And so I think that one of the things that we can learn is we need to ask first. If we got a problem with somebody or something that somebody may be doing, we need to ask. Don't automatically just jump to conclusions. Because when we're in that situation, it could be just like what's going on here with these tribes, that they did something that there's just a misunderstanding, and so we need to ask first. So if you think about it just from our own relationships that we have, obviously these are brothers and sisters, and so there's this close relationship, and that's one of the things that the Transjordanic tribes are wanting for everybody to remember. Hey, we've got this, we may be separated by a river, but we're still connected. But they do have this relationship. And so think about, again, just the relationships that we have, all the relationships that we have in our life, and how much better or how much more we could improve our relationships when we have issues or maybe supposed issues with people, if we would just ask first before rushing to conclusions about things. I mean, if you think about just our marriages and our families, at work, obviously at church, and all of these different avenues, we need to make sure that we are asking first, and we're not a group of people or a Christian that's just going to shoot from the hip based on what we see and what we think, because we could think that we're doing wrong or that we're doing right, but we could end up doing wrong because we don't know the full story, and we could do a lot of damage in that situation, which is what could have happened here if they didn't have that leadership to go to the people and to ask. Sam?
And in contrast to this, like what would have also been bad is if they suspected that something bad was going on and they didn't do anything about it. I mean, like, that would be messed up too. Like, you should probably, I don't want to say like, you know, shove your nose in other people's business, but if something is obviously suspect, you do have a responsibility as well. It wasn't optional for them to go and ask them about it.
Yes, which we will talk in a question to a little bit more. Kenny?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, your hand was.
So we need to be willing to listen. We need to be willing to ask questions. We need to be able to clarify intentions. Because when we do that, we're going to be able to prevent unnecessary conflicts that could have happened here. And we're going to be able to promote unity and harmony with, again, whatever relationship that we have. And again, thankfully, they had the leadership to see before just acting and going to war. So question 2, what applications do you think we can draw from the story in chapter 22 about our responsibility to correct individual Christians and or other congregations? And I listed the passages there, Matthew 18, 15 through 17, Acts 5, verse 8, Acts 15, 1 through 6, and Galatians 6, verse 1. So go ahead and turn over to Matthew 18. Let's read 15 through 17. So this gets into a little bit of what we've already discussed and what Sam was bringing up there. So Matthew 18, 15 through 17, who do we get to? Camden's up.
First piece, going back.
Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother.
But if he does not listen to you, take 1 or 2 more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed.
And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector.
And then Galatians 6, verse 1, it says, Brethren, even if anyone is caught in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself, so that you too will not be tempted. So what application do you think we can draw here from chapter 22 about our responsibility to correct individual Christians? Shannon?
Have manners and love.
Okay, so I think that goes along with Galatians 6, verse 1 there, that we're supposed to do so with the spirit of gentleness. Obviously, the people that are on the west side of the Jordan, they did have love for those that are on the east side of the Jordan, and they wanted to make sure that they were handling things correctly and appropriately. But along with the love that they had for their brothers on the east side of the Jordan, who else did they have a love for? God. And I think that to me, it just shows the passion that they had, the zeal, as we're talking about on Wednesday nights, the zeal that they had for the Lord and making sure that their brothers and sisters were going to be obedient to the Lord. Brother Bill?
They understood that the sin of some of the people had consequences for all the people. And to add to that list, the passage in James 5, 19 and 20 talks about our responsibility too to bring people back.
Yes. And this is something that they had been witness to themselves. I mean, if you just think about this second generation here that had learned the lessons of God and His teachings in the wilderness, and that He's going to stand against rebellion, that He's not going to stand for rebellion. We know the situation that we have already discussed with Achan's sin, and again, they've got these reminders that God is not going to stand for a rebellious people. And so we can't be okay with rebellion against the Lord. All right, Bonnie?
And it's important to remember that we have to know God's word first. So if we don't know what the truth is, we can't see it when it's not being observed. So we have to be careful to make sure we know what the truth is, and then also, like it talks about, not be deceived or tempted ourselves when we go and talk to somebody.
Yeah, and that ties in with what Shannon was talking about. We can't go at people just because we're wanting to shove it in their face and look at what you're doing and how horrible you are. It should be with a spirit of trying to restore them to a right relationship with the Lord, if in fact that is needed. Obviously, we may find out that we were misunderstood. We were misunderstanding what was taking place. So I saw Gil.
Firstly, this does show that we do have a responsibility to correct if there's sin. But secondly, kind of shows we shouldn't assume what people are doing. whether good or bad, we should go ask. Unless we assume in the best possible light, don't assume the worst, which is jumping to conclusions, but continue to ask and confirm the truth and do it with a loving attitude, because that's what love is. You assume the best for someone.
Yes. Norm?
It also gives us an indication of a time reference where if we're going to do this, which we should do out of love for our brothers and sisters, it needs not be a hasty process. It needs to be something well thought out. These people went a long way to go to be with their brothers to find out what it was that they were talking about. Sometimes we do things maybe a little too hasty out of convenience, or I gotta nip this in the bud before it goes too far. We need to be thoughtful and take the necessary time to get the right answer.
Yeah, and this goes along with what we had said in question 1 there, but there was a direct confrontation. And I don't use the word confrontation in the negative sense. I just mean the tribes on the west side of the Jordan could have just talked amongst themselves and be like, can you believe this? Like, what do you think's going on here? Well, what do you think's going on here? No, we have a question or a concern, we're going to go directly to that person, to that group of people. We're not going to go talk about it with everybody else. We're not going to go gossiping about it. We're going to go directly to them, and we're going to keep it as private as what it needs to be. And so it's not something that we're just automatically going to spread. And again, we're going to have a focus of restoring them to a right relationship with the Lord. We're going to do so with humility. We're going to do it with compassion. And we're going to do so with discernment, where we're going to have to evaluate different situations and make the right judgments. Danny?
So we notice there that the whole congregation doesn't gather to go to war against them. So there was already some talking amongst them for the whole congregation to be gathered. And so I think the lesson that we can learn from this is sometimes the whole church is kind of in error a little bit, and but luckily churches have sound, strong leaders, and they're able to, handle the situation. And that's actually what happened here with Israel. I mean, if it hadn't been for their leadership, there'd been a war.
Yeah, there would have definitely been a war, and that can happen just so easily, definitely within the church, where people see something or they hear something, rumors get started, people are gossiping, and they don't understand what's going on. And this is, yes, why we do need strong leaders within the church to be able to handle these situations. Sam?
And when you see the response of the Reubenites and the Gadites, they do respond in humility. So they may know in their mind that they haven't done anything wrong necessarily, but they don't get offended or whatever. So if someone does approach you because it appears like they're doing something wrong, and let's say you aren't, I think the aspect of them approaching you in humility should also be reciprocated by you, and that you can't think, oh, this person is super tight, and he's just going to be stalking me to figure out every possible thing I could be doing wrong. And you might have some sort of contention build up. If you reciprocate that as well, I think the way that the commands are designed, it's supposed to be that you understand that the person's coming to you out of love. I think your responsibility as the person being, I don't want to say questioned, but the one who's being approached about certain matters, your responsibility is equally important to receive it with humility, even if you haven't done anything wrong, because you know that it's out of love that they're approaching you.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we can very easily, when we get questioned, automatically question the one that's questioning us and saying, I can't believe that you would think that, that's what I was, that's what my intentions were. And so we need to, again, it needs to be reciprocal, that we're doing things out of love and recognizing that people are going to come to us out of love as well. Number 3, in chapter 23, Joshua reminds the people of God's faithfulness, especially in verses 5, 10, and 14. Every time Joshua spoke of God keeping his word, he also expressed a response that the people were to have because of God's faithfulness. What responses were the people to have, and what can we take away from this? So there in verse 5, Joshua says that they're going to continue to take possession of the land just as the Lord your God has promised you. Then in verse 10, Joshua says that the Lord is going to fight for them just as he had promised you. And then there in verse 14, which I think is probably one of the key verses to all of chapter 23, it says, Now behold, today I'm going the way of all the earth, and you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one word of all the good words which the Lord your God spoke concerning you has failed. All have been fulfilled for you. Not one of them has failed. So God's promises, and what's the responses there? Lena?
He tells them, be courageous to keep and do all that is written in the law, and to take heed of yourselves that you love the Lord.
Okay. So there in verse 6, you have be firm then, keep all and do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, so that you may not turn aside from it to the right hand or to the left. And then there in verse 11, after verse 10 there, so take diligent heed to yourselves to love the Lord your God. Norm?
Where their faith has to become personal. Up until it's easy to do the right things when you're in amongst the like when we're here today, okay. But it's when you go out by yourself at home the rest of the week that the issues start to arise, and this is that great warning that's coming about, because Joshua knows he's going away. I mean, he's not going to be around for them to lean on anymore. They're going to have to lean on themselves, and the day-to-day being faithful is the tough part.
Yeah, and just as his promises of taking care of them, not one of them have failed. In verse 15, they're also being warned, just like his promises have not failed, his threats are also not going to fail. And so if you don't do these things, if you don't keep your end of the bargain, if you're not continuing to be strong, to obey, and to be careful to love the Lord your God, then there are going to be consequences that you're going to have to pay. But I think that this is something for us, that when we struggle maybe with our obedience to the Lord, I mean, one encouragement that I think God has given us is to look at the promises that have been fulfilled, and knowing that he's going to keep his promises, and I can follow his instructions, I can keep his laws, and I can love him in obedience. All right, question number 4. What practices or habits can we cultivate to help us recognize and give thanks to God's past acts of provision and deliverance in our lives? Give thanks. It seems so simple, but it seems so hard for some reason. And I know we've had lessons in the past, and I've taught a lesson, but we talk about having an attitude of gratitude. And that is something that I think Joshua is trying to get the people to understand. Look at all of the things that God has done for you, and you should be thankful. What else? Is it Shirley?
Need to always be faithful.
What's that?
Be faithful.
Be faithful. All right, so be thankful, be faithful. Lena?
Blessings, because when you remember what good things happen to you or around you, you remember the power of God and how awesome he is.
So what tends to happen when something bad in our life happens?
People blame God.
All right, so they blame God.
Discouragement.
All right, so there's discouragement. And I think one of the things that I want us to really understand and recognize is the devil is trying to get the opposite of what God is trying to get out of us. The devil's trying to get that out of us. And so he wants us to be consumed by the bad things that may be happening in our lives. And so when we go through trials and different struggles, the devil wants you to get consumed by those things, because if you are consumed by those, you're not going to be thankful, you're not going to be faithful, you're not going to be counting your blessings, you're going to be so consumed by the things that you are going through that you're going to go into this spiral of despair, oftentimes self-pity. We're going to have a higher level of anxiety, and that is the devil trying to weaken our
I just think we need to, what we said earlier though, to be around our brethren more and be talkative in a good way and sharing things and sharing struggles, sort of, that you see the benefits and the growth and things like that. But we were at my father-in-law's too and just going through things, and it's hard, and we're sorrowful and crying a little bit, but it's just hard just because you have to move on. But then holding on to memories and things like that, and I'm trying to get through the kids for that too. But just be there for each other, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing that God allows us. So while the devil is trying to keep us down, we should be trying to lift each other up. And not in a sense of being mean about it and be like, I can't believe that you're so down. Like, you know, pick yourself up and let's go. But obviously, like the situation what Shannon is talking about, we can weep with those who are weeping. But we can also remind them of the good blessings that God has given us and that we should continue to be thankful for the things that God has done for us. And I think a lot of it is habits. I think that so much of what we do every single day is the result of habits that we've formed over time. And so when we allow ourselves to get so deep in depression and anxiety, then it might be harder to get out of those things. And so we have to train ourselves on a daily basis to count our blessings, to be more thankful for the things, and to think about the promises that God has given us and how He has provided for us in the past in our lives. And so we have to, in all of our ways, acknowledge Him. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6. And there was an article that I had read, and just for sake of time, I don't want to read all of it, but it says, it's entitled, Do I See Myself as a Victim or an Architect? And I think that our society has, in general, just this victim mentality. And it's so easy for us to get caught up in that too. But really, we should be the architect of our own lives and building ourselves up. Over in Jude 20, it says, But you, beloved, building yourselves up on your most holy faith. And then in Proverbs 14:1, the wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. And so what am I allowing in my life? What type of influences am I allowing in my life? What is ultimately winning over in my life? And so we cannot let ourselves get so down that we lose sight of God and His promises. Question? Go ahead, Eddie. Oh, Miss Shirley, sorry. Go ahead.
I know when we lost Teresa, I went through some rough days, and I was down. But I know the good Lord took her to get her out of her pain. Doesn't mean you don't miss her that much more, and I still do. But you have to go on. But you don't have a choice. You've got to go pick yourself up and go on and try to do better for the ones that are left.
We got to keep keeping on. We got to remain faithful, and we can't let the difficult things in life, because God's not promised us an easy life. He's not said that things are going to be easy, but He has promised us that He is going to be there for us, and we need to rely and stand and hold fast to that promise. Number 5, how should Joshua's statement in 23 verse 10, one of your men puts to flight 1,000, have inspired the people, and how should it help us in our battles? God's with us and we can do anything. I mean, that's a pretty powerful statement when you think about it. One of your men puts to flight 1,000. And it's not because of that one man. It's because that man is standing with God. And God is going to allow this to happen. God's power is what is going to allow that to happen. And so we have to have that faith. We have to have that trust in God and recognize that He is the strength, He is the power, and we have to stand with Him. Anything else on number 5? Number 6, Joshua warns the people in 23, 12, and 13 of what will happen if they associate and intermarry with the people of the land. How can we make application to the warning? In what ways can disobedience to God's commandments become a snare and a trap for us today? April?
If we associate with unfaithful people, they can negatively influence us. And, an example of that would be marrying a non-Christian, how they can influence us towards disobeying God, and so just the influence that others can have on us.
Yeah, those that are going to be closest to us are going to be the ones that are going to most heavily influence us. And I think of Solomon in 1 Kings 11, verse 4, "For when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away from other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been." Bonnie?
2 Corinthians 6:14 talks about how it's hard to serve two masters, and Satan knows very well who our other master might be. So he knows our weaknesses and where to attack.
Yes. So when you think about a trap, a snare, or a trap, how does that work? It's something you can't get out of.
It's usually hidden or camouflaged as something that maybe you want, or that looks easy or looks pleasant.
Yes, it looks enticing. Just when I was going through this lesson, one of the things that I was thinking about, when I was married to my late wife, I had built a squirrel trap, and I was so proud of myself, but I'd never seen it actually work. And I remember one morning we got home from Sunday services, and we were sitting in the kitchen and looking out the window, and like there was a squirrel that was just kind of walking around the trap, and I was like, oh man, this is going to happen. We actually got to see the squirrel get trapped because of the peanut butter that's inside. It's enticing. But once he was in, he ain't getting out. And oftentimes when we think about the way that the devil works, it's not going to be something that's blatant. It's not going to be some flashing sign saying, hey, this is a trap, this is a snare. No, it's going to be disguised. And it is something that we can gradually become entangled in. And that can happen very easily within the marriage relationship if you are married to someone who is a non-Christian. Again, it may not be something that is just right off the bat, but it's something that can be gradually working on us. It's going to be deceiving. Again, we think that it's one thing, but it's not. And the more we get, or the deeper we get, the less we're going to have wisdom and discernment. And we have to make sure that we are vigilant against even small deviations from God's commands, because small deviations, take or give an inch and take a foot or something like that. So it can seem very, very small and insignificant, and it can turn into a full departure from God and His Word. Number 7, chapter 24, verse 14, Joshua says, "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve Him." What reasons were given to the people prior to verse 14 that allowed Joshua to make such a statement? So we always focus, I shouldn't say we, maybe it's just me, because the book of Joshua is one of my favorite books, and Joshua 24:15 is always like that's the passage. And so what allows Joshua before that, and before he tells the people to fear the Lord and serve Him, what is taking place there in verses 1 through 12? Lena?
So it shows that the Lord was faithful with them through and through with every step of their way, and it starts with Abraham and his father, and the ancestors were worshiping other gods, but the Lord God led Abraham out, and then it mentions Moses and Aaron, and everybody was led by God to the spot where they are right now.
You know, the more that I think about how constantly the people are being reminded of what God has done, I think about our own selves, and you know what? We too need to constantly be reminded of what the Lord has done. And so Joshua again is telling them this history in terms of their need to see how blessed they are and how God has kept His promises. And I think it's interesting because 21 times in this God says, I took, or I gave, or I did. It's always something that God did. So 21 times He is the one who acted on behalf of the people. That's a reminder for the people. And because of that now, they need to fear the Lord, and they need to serve Him. And then, of course, Joshua comes back and tells them that they also have to choose, and as for he and his house, they will serve the Lord. Number 8, after Joshua's declaration of his faith and the faith of his household, he tells the people to choose. They respond in verse 18 and say, "We also will serve the Lord, for he is our God." Why did Joshua reject their ability to fulfill their promise? What 2 specific characteristics of God does he give for why the people will not be able to keep their promise? So the people automatically come out and say, "We're also going to serve the Lord, for he is our God." And you'd think Joshua would be thinking, "That's great. That's exactly what I needed to hear." What was the problem? Ken?
He knew their history. He knew how they were faithful one day and unfaithful the next day. And so it's difficult for him to believe them when they say this. And also, the second part of that question, God is a jealous God and a holy God. And if they turn away, he will not forgive.
He is holy, he is jealous. You can't serve God a little bit and idols a little bit. All right, it's all or nothing. And so Ken mentioned that Joshua is remembering their past and kind of the way that they have handled themselves in regards to their service to God. But it's not just their past. And I think sometimes maybe we don't see this. Joshua isn't just telling them, well, you've never shown yourself to be able to serve the Lord and treat him as holy. They're still serving idols. In verse 23 it says, "Now therefore put away the foreign gods which are in your midst." Like they're still with them. You can't stand there and tell me when I tell you to choose and me and my house is going to serve the Lord, and you stand up and say, "We're going to serve the Lord too." But you're not. You can't do that. You can't say this and act like this. And so you got to put the stuff away. All right? Again, you can't serve God a little bit and your idols a little bit too. It's all or nothing. You have to be fully devoted to the Lord. All right, anything else? Norm?
Our time of greatest danger is when we arrogantly stand up and say, "I can't fail in this. We got this made. This is going to be easy for me." And then smack, you're down, and it happens every time. And so God warns us about humility and pride, and this is a little stamp on the wall there to say, we need to be humble in our service and know that in our case, Jesus died for us, knowing that we were that not only had we sinned, but we were going to. The chances of us sinning in the future are great, and we need to be humble and serve Him with that humility, knowing that, and being thankful to Him that we have a way out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I lost my thought now. Sorry.
Sam?
Do you think, does anyone think that verse 19, that Joshua is being intentionally prophetic in like what God is speaking through him? Like, there seems to be this connection is being made. Obviously, God is holy and He's jealous, but their state is directly related to how they're acting, saying that God won't forgive your transgressions. Is this some sort of representation of like this is the way this current covenant is? There may be something greater down the road. Like, is that intentional, or am I reading into that?
Well, I think it's just intentional in the fact that through God, Joshua knows that they're still serving idols, and they still have them in their presence, and so they're not going to be able to stand before God. They're not going to be able to serve the Lord because of their current situation. And I do think that there's a bit of their history, and you kind of see what has happened, but I think it's more to the point of what's currently going on. You can't stand there and say that you're going to serve the Lord. And I think that this is something that is very easy for us to justify maybe in our own minds, and we feel like, well, we're serving the Lord, and there may be small things in our lives that we think there's not that big of a deal. It's a big deal to God because He is holy and He is jealous. Number 9, what's the connection between the death of Moses and the death of Joshua? Sister Shirley?
They were both servants of God.
are given that title, that honor, I would say, being called the servant of the Lord. And Jesus says in Matthew 25, verse 21, his master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." And so I think about the honor that was bestowed upon Joshua and Moses here simply by being called a servant of the Lord. And I hope that we recognize that God can and will honor us if we choose today to put away our gods and to put away our idols and to serve the Lord with all sincerity and faithfulness. All right, so we got done, but I do want to talk just briefly about question 10 because I'm curious to know everybody's thoughts and their takeaways from the book of Joshua. So in 2 weeks, be prepared for that, and then we'll pick up with the book of Judges. Thanks, everybody.